Hi, this is Deep Tran,
I'm Jose Solis.
and we're your token theater friends, people who love theater so much that Jose owns not one, but two Judy face masks that you could see it if you were watching this on YouTube instead of listening to it. But
And I'm wearing my
I,
mask for a very special reason because I'm so excited that today we have like a really extra super special. Is that even a word? Probably not. We have a special, very special episode because it was so big and so long that Deep even called us Infinity War, which is like a straight thing, right?
yes, it
Okay.
is very strict.
So we ended up with an
It is
episode.
token theater friends, Infinity War, Part 1.
I want Gwyneth Paltrow to play me. Is that problematic?
No.
Okay. We have a very long episode and we want to share all the good stuff that we have for you. So we ended up deciding to, instead of like super editing our episode, we are going to give you two episodes instead of one this week. We have part one, which is going to be an interview with George Salazar, who you know from Be More Chill. And if you were lucky enough to see him in Little Shop of Horrors in California, which is why I'm also wearing this, I'm so
Which you also
excited.
cannot see if this is a podcast.
I'm very nerdy today. I'm sorry. But George is doing Night of a Thousand Duties on July 14th. So we're going to be talking to him about that and what he's been doing in quarantine. And in part two, Deep, what are we doing?
Part 2, we have our Hamilton Congress, where we have two very special guests come in to talk to us about, wait for it, Hamilton. Because we've noticed that just like in 2015, right now, most of the people critiquing Hamilton are white people, which is pretty problematic because the show is written by a person of color and is starring people of color. So why are there very few people of color who are not named Soraya McDonald writing about it? Who knows? But we decided to do something about it by bringing in two amazing guests to talk about it. First, we have Heath Saunders, who is an amazing actor and composer, and you may remember them from Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812 on Broadway. So they have experience performing, and they will give us they gave us insight on whose performance translated better onto the screen. No shade. And our second guest is Kelundra Smith, who is an arts journalist and friend to me and Jose. And she critiques theater in Atlanta for Arts ATL and the Atlanta Journal Constitution. So it's it's a really long discussion, but we promise you it is worth it because we go in. We go in far. We almost didn't come out.
Will they be satisfied?
I don't know. We hope you'll be satisfied, but we will never be satisfied with our Hamilton discussion because we could have gone on for longer.
Oh my god, we could have, yeah. And we put in a lot of work.
Yeah. Okay, we are here for our cabinet battle number 1
I love that.
with our very special guests, Heath Saunders and Kelundra Smith. Hi, everyone. Can you can someone introduce themselves and tell the listeners who you are, what you do, when did you see Hamilton? Heath, do you want to start?
All right. Hi, I'm Heath Saunders. I'm a composer, a writer, and an actor. Um, and what I saw Hamilton on Broadway in previews, and then I didn't see it again until the Disney Plus uh, film. So that's I have a long-standing relationship. It's also been very interesting to me because the Hamilton was one of those things that people told me I had to see because they were like, you can be the next Lin-Manuel Miranda, because when you act and you write and you act in the things you write, there's a very limited context for what you can do when you're a person of color. So basically, like, you're a person of color, you write, you act, you must be Lin-Manuel Miranda. And I was like, so Lin and I do very different things. but what can be done? So I have a long history with the Lin-Manuel Miranda world. I'm deeply impressed by him as a general rule.
Cool. I'm Kelundra Smith. I am a theater critic and arts journalist based in Atlanta. I freelance for a number of publications around the country, including the New York Times, Food and Wine Magazine, American Theater, and Arts ATL. I saw Hamilton in fall of 2018 in Charlotte, North Carolina, when it was on the first round equity tour. And funny story, actually, the reason I saw it in Charlotte is because I was unable to get press tickets to see it in Atlanta and raised a stink about it on Twitter and had a lot of support in raising a stink about it on Twitter. Which led to me getting a call from the national press agent for Hamilton, who then said, we have been trying to get more critics of color in the room where it happens, and we are deeply sorry. So that is how I ended up seeing it in Charlotte. So that's an interesting tidbit there. And so seeing it on Disney Plus was a different kind of experience because that's not the cast I saw. And so I'm not only comparing the live experience to the on-screen experience, but also the cast I saw compared to the original cast, which I have to say, there are some performances I liked better from the tour cast.
Yeah, I think, Jose, did you see it at the Public?
No.
Okay.
By the time that I wanted to go see it, it was too popular, and I never won the lottery. So I saw it for the first time on Broadway in 2017, January 2017.
Yeah, I saw it at the Public, and then, which, mood, but, and then I saw it again on Broadway, and it's funny that they were talking about trying to get critics of color in there, because I fucking had to, practically sell my firstborn in order to get a ticket. Because I'm actually writing about this. I'm not freeloading.
No, it was a struggle because the way in which, New York works a little bit different than the regional theater in the sense that in New York, all of the shows, whether you're on Broadway or off Broadway, have a press agent. But in the regions, there's usually one publicity firm that is responsible for handling all of the Broadway across America shows for a given market. And so it is up to the publicist at that one firm who gets into the Broadway tour shows. And so the shows that are struggling to get an audience, they usually are begging press to come to. And then the ones that are not so struggling to get an audience, they are only allowing, they still are very traditional in the sense that they are giving priority to people who are full-time reporters at daily papers or at television networks. But the gag is, as we all know, there are no full-time theater reporters left at any daily newspapers in America. So what actually is happening is that they are giving the tickets to editors under the guise that there will be coverage of this thing. And then what really happens is that the editors really never get those tickets. They're going to the ad sales staff, and they're being used so that that ad sales staff can ensure that, insert name of a utility company or auto company will continue to advertise with that newspaper or that magazine. So the people who actually are going to cover it never get the press tickets. Wow. So that is the conversation that I had with the national publicity agent for Hamilton at the time, as well as the conversation that I had with one of the big producers for Disney on Broadway when they pulled their regional publicity back in-house. So
wow, talk about freeloaders.
I was gonna say, so we're just and so that's a perfect segue to what this musical's about.
Ooh, okay.
We're getting spicy from the beginning.
And if it makes you feel better, Disney on Broadway is terrible also in New York. So that's the thing they have.
Yeah,
in,
but no, like talk
yeah.
about people who don't let other people of color in. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, do I even want to talk about a Disney product anymore after listening to this? Like, no, let's talk about another show instead. But no,
Yeah.
the first bill that we're going to introduce into the session today is let's talk about the difference between seeing the show on stage live, back when we were allowed to see other people in public and brush against them,
Oh.
and seeing it on television or your iPad or your iPhone or wherever you saw it.
I will offer that of the pro shot musicals that I've seen, the Hamilton film is very effective at, if not translating the exact experience of seeing the show live, it does translate the sort of thrust of a live performed show, which I found really nice. Because as a person who adores musical theater, it is interesting to the ways that it's shot often make it seem significantly worse than it is. And I didn't really feel that way with the Hamilton film, which I sort of liked. But one of the things that I thought it lost is actually it's both a criticism of the original show and a sort of thing that I liked about the original show, which is that the original show was so much information constantly. It's like, I mean, Act One especially is just like an assault of visual information and oral information that makes it quite difficult to follow at certain points, and it actually makes it so the parts of it which I think are expertly crafted really got buoyed. Like we all love the helpless and dissatisfied moment. I think I can't actually technically speak for you, but for me, that moment of stagecraft was so impressive and so just like stunning. I knew exactly where to look. I knew what was happening around, where my eye was going. Everything about that moment was so thrilling to me. And while in the film, it captures the sort of story moment of it, it doesn't really quite. Something about the aggressive shifts of camera made it so I wasn't able to sort of appreciate what I consider the stagecraft of that moment. And so it ended up being a little bit like, oh yeah, that happened. And less of what happened for me in the show when I saw it, when I was out of my seat, this is expertly crafted. And that's a little bit disappointing. But again, it's sort of a double-edged sword here that we're talking about, which is it is not meant to be a film. So this version of it, I think, was a really, really effective capturing of it in this new medium. And also I lost some of the things about theater that I love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually to your point, Heath, I actually don't think the choreography was best served through it, because most of the time the camera wasn't on the ensemble who was doing the brunt of the movement. It was on the main performers, which that's who we want to see. But there's the moment where Hamilton gets shot and Ariana DeBose plays the bullet, and you barely even see her do that epic slow walk across the platform because you're concentrating on Lin-Manuel. And I feel like that's the thing about film, the camera tells you who is important. But in theater, you're allowed to look wherever you want to look and take in the entire stage picture. And so I kind of missed a lot of the wider shots I remember in the theater because Tommy Kail was telling me I need to look right here at Lin while he's talking. I'm like, no, I want to look at Ariana. I love what she was doing right there.
As a general rule, I always want to look at Ariana DeBose. So,
yeah.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that if anything, I think the focus of the camera helped to clarify story in some ways if you had missed it when you saw it live. And then, of course, there's closed captioning on your TV. So then, you're like, oh, okay. So I think there's some clarity there. But what I really missed in addition to, I think one of the strengths of Lin-Manuel's musicals in general is all the stuff happening in the black background. He loves a street scene that looks very realistic. So we're not going to be on a street sidewalk in New York and there not be people going by in the background. And some folks are going to be holding umbrellas and maybe it's raining. And so that's some of the stuff that you didn't get by watching it through the screen on Disney Plus. And then I think the other thing that I miss too is the energy of the music doesn't come across through the screen, because there's something about that live orchestra that sound is all around you and you're swallowed up by it. Now, the numbers that did come across, like the room where it happens, still, it was amazing in person. It's amazing on screen. Like, you're just like, it's in your head, you're jazzy, you're singing it. But then there are other musical numbers that I really liked in person, but like the energy of that live instrumentation is what boosted them, but you didn't get on screen.
The movie version, I feel, is a great example of what you're all saying, which is, movies are, after all, like a director's medium, right? And yeah, like choosing what to focus on is, I really admired this version, because it must have been like hell, because like, yeah, Lin loves all his Easter eggs, but they're usually happening all over. And I thought that this would be a great example of a movie that, remember back when DVDs had this like multi-angle option where you can choose where to look from? This would benefit from that. Because if we had gotten, the way that, that standard shot that we get when shows are recorded to preserve them at the Lincoln Center Library, those are like terrible. Like we don't want to look at the whole thing all the time. So I was really impressed, actually. And did you hear that people were talking about whether this movie was going to be eligible for Oscars or not? Because like Oscars are bending the rules this year to let. No, it's true, to let movies that were originally scheduled.
Wow, controversial opinion, Kelundra. Tell us more.
No, because there's going to be a film adaptation of Hamilton that is not the Broadway show.
But I mean, right now this is the movie that we have, so
no,
it would be.
I'm not going to let you right here.
Look,
I think it's important. I mean, I'm all about genre busting media, right? Like I want media to be multimedia. I love that we sort of blur the lines. I think the challenge that I have with the idea of this particular, I mean, I even have a hard time calling it the Hamilton film. I'm like, it's not really a film.
No.
And when I appraise it, it's funny because as soon as I go into the like, do you want me to appraise this as a movie? Then I go into a little bit of the like, there's camera things. I just like, I'm like, it's not like cinematically an extraordinary work beyond the idea that the job is to convey what's happening on stage. So, I mean, I think about like, Lars von Trier does some movies that are like staged, but to me, what he's doing is a film. Like they're not meant to be watched live. Hamilton remains it feels like to me, the Hamilton film feels like a really, really great archival recording, more than it feels like a piece of art on its own that stands as. And again, that's a now that it's coming out of my mouth, I have a little bit more like, do I really think that? But I think I you know what? I'm going to stand by it.
That's art criticism, Heath. You don't know until it comes out.
I'm glad you brought up Lars, Heath, because I was going to challenge, this notion with that precisely. Manderley and Dogville are shot at a soundstage. Kelundra and Deep, have you seen those movies?
No, but no. I remember the Anna Karenina, the Joel, the one with Keira Knightley, and it was
Joe Wright's adaptation.
Joe Wright's Anna Karenina, that was done like a play because there was a stage, and that was like a metaphor, which metaphors don't work well on film. That's my thing.
What? Like films are like the medium of metaphors. Films are about dreams, basically. But anyway, in Lars von Trier's films, like Dogville and Manderley, he basically shoots them in a completely empty soundstage. And it's very Brechtian in that when he shoots from above, you can see like the outlines of what the buildings are, for instance, telling you what's there. So it's a movie without sets, without objects, without props. And you have to imagine things. And there's a few sound effects. They're like fucking fantastic. So I was at the Academy when I was talking about this, but this is a real conversation that people are having. And if the Academy deems that Disney is right and that the movie can be eligible for Academy Awards, it will be eligible for Academy Awards, even if it
there
was,
ain't nothing we can do that about.
yeah, yeah.
I will not be happy about this. I think it is its own product, because I mean, unless it's creating a new genre of film, like what category does this go under? Is it documentary? Is it feature? Is it what is it? I mean, I'm okay if we're saying we're going to make a new category of film for Broadway or theatrical, shows shot. What is that? Like, I need somebody to tell me what category it falls under, because to me, it is not a feature film. And I don't know that it's fair that you would put Hamilton in the same category as something that had a bigger budget and CGI. Like, I don't know. What do you do with that? I'm curious. I'm genuinely asking. I'm not, I can be swayed.
I want to ask Kelundra, since you're saying that, isn't categorization precisely what keeps people of color from participating in all these things? Are they even making real theater if it's not this or that? And if we go and like try to categorize even something like this, where in a year where, a lot of movies aren't being released at all, it would give, actors of color the opportunity to compete in the Oscar race, which is usually extremely white. So why this, need for categorization when being classified is how racism started, how we are kept from participating in all these very, very white circles. Like I don't get that.
Our desire to remove categories from the Oscars doesn't remove categories from the Oscars. So they're going to put this movie in a category. Like, it's not, I mean, I'm not saying what Kelundra wants. You know what I mean? The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences is going to put this movie in a category, whether we like it or not. My question is, what category does it go in? And does that category set this film up for success? Is it fair, or is this something that we need to channel into like a Golden Globes or an Emmys if we want to award it with something to give it its best opportunity for a win? Because I can foresee the moment where there's all this hype around, oh my God, Hamilton recording is nominated for an Oscar, and then all of these people of color are like ready with their, acceptance speeches, and then all of a sudden it's like, and the Oscar goes to insert name of Russell Crowe film or whatever, So I think that I want us. I mean, I'm if we're gonna dismantle, but I don't think the Academy will dismantle just by letting this be eligible. I think they're going to put this in a category and be like, well, if it's good enough, it'll stand up. And it's like, actually, if the category itself is discriminatory, then it's not going to stand up.
Yeah, I mean, there's only two categories, basically. It's nonfiction, which is documentaries, and then, movies, which is everything else. So,
and this would be like a documentary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Maybe, I don't know. I'm just asking.
I mean, no, I'm like, for instance, the movies that Heath and I were talking about, the Lars von Trier movies, which were shot on a soundstage with chalk outlines, were movies. They're not documentaries. The intention's what's different.
But for me, what for me is really important to differentiate between the Lars von Trier movie and the Hamilton film is that the Hamilton film, I mean, if we want to talk about like the flow of money and the way that things happen and why the Hamilton film was made when other shows that are put on stage are not made into movies in this way, like this is not about, Hamilton was not they did not direct this musical to be the thing that it is. That it is literally a capturing of a different category of media. And that for me is where I'm like, Lars von Trier was making a film. He was making a film using a set of techniques that were based on the direction of the actors, was directing them toward the idea that this thing was meant to be a film. It was the whole creation of the soundstage was designed. It wasn't like people were meant to be in watching the thing. He was making a film. And that's not to say that this piece of art, the Hamilton film, is not a film unto itself. It feels like we're like having more and more steps of removal from what the thing is, right? We've created a musical, and then you like film it, and it's like if I took the recording of the movie, the Hamilton film, and then I like recut it myself, would I be making a new piece of, like, it's a valid thing to do as an artist, but it does, to me, it feels, And then for me, what becomes most disingenuous about that in the context of like giving bodies of color opportunity to compete in these spaces is that these actors are not performing as though they're not. For me as an actor, I get really worked up because I do believe that performing on film is different than performing on stage. And I would argue, in the Hamilton film, there are performances that are served by this new media in a way that other performances are not. And it is not one-to-one. There are performances on the stage that I think are really, really solid musical theater or Broadway performances that I think, and again, this is not to be disparaging, saying that one is better than the other. It's just they're different.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I'm a little bit with Kelundra, where I'm like, are we setting this up for success? Because who actually wins out of this? These we're not giving these actors of color this opportunity to compete in this new space that they otherwise wouldn't. We're giving a bunch of white people who, in fact, budgeted and funded the entire thing the opportunity for clout within their white system.
Right.
So,
and the Schuyler Sisters, to your point, the Schuyler Sisters performance is a musical theater performance. It is that, I mean, when they come out on that stage and the vocal prowess that those singers have, I mean, it's chills up your spine. I mean, the notes that they're hitting. But that performance would not be the same if this was shot to be a film.
right.
And then you also, I wonder what that does to folks like Anthony Ramos, right? Who he is a formidable film and television actor. He's going to be in the In the Heights movie, not the film of the musical, but the actual Universal Pictures movie, right? And so then, I mean, his performance that he's giving you in the musical Hamilton is different than what he's already proven he can do in other films and in other television shows. Because I mean, he's been working, you know. So I think that there's something to be said there too.
I want to say that right now, I'm so happy right now because I'm imagining white people, if you're watching this or if you're listening to this, can you imagine if this was what like the actual House of Representatives and the Senate looked like and sounded like holy shit, like what a world we would be in. I am very happy with this conversation. So thank you for being here. The second bill that we want to introduce is the difference between 2015 and 2020. It's been 5 years since the musical first showed up anywhere. Wrong. It showed up as that at that press dinner, right? First. Yeah. But even since like the stage version, the final version was presented, it's been 5 years. And let's talk about the difference between how it was received back then by us and by people and what it feels like to be seeing this show in 2020. Let's go first.
I mean, we switched presidents since then. Like this is a very much an Obama, the only musical that could be written in an Obama administration where we're all feeling very positive about, relatively positive. I mean, generally, I'm not speaking for Native Americans or immigrants in cages, but we were all feeling. I know in 2015, like I was feeling pretty good about the state of the country. This musical made me feel so patriotic and so represented, because here's two things I love. I love period dramas. And it just makes me so sad that POCs are never in period dramas because they're usually with white people. And I'm just like, oh my God, there's this gorgeous Black woman and she's wearing a Regency gown. Like that is everything I have ever wanted. And so, and I love reading about history and being able to read. The musical did in 2015. I felt the musical did successfully what it was trying to do, which is to reclaim history in our image using these figures that we were taught in school as Americans to revere. And I think what Hamilton did was like make them seem more human. Like at the time, it was like, oh my God, how dare you portray, Thomas Jefferson as someone with an actual personality. And I think but I think now this is what's interesting about art. And in just 5 years, it became something that was so revolutionary to something that's so problematic. And the thing hasn't changed, but we have. And like watching it is for me, it's different now because I don't really feel particularly proud, but to be an American, but I do feel like things that hit differently for me this time around was the call to revolution and the notion that it's okay. It was only ever okay for white people to be revolutionaries, but this musical showed that any the people who are on the streets right now are people who look like us. Like we are the revolutionaries. But at the same time, you can't disagree with the fact that it is still about white people. And so, what is the next step towards representation?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, is it
Am I,
just selling a yeah?
am I the only person here? I mean, I know that you came here very young, Deep, but am I the only person who migrated, who was born outside the U.S., who came here as an adult?
Yeah, you
Yes?
are.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's really interesting to me because when I saw it, even, it is very Obama, but Obama was disastrous to the rest of the world. Obama was putting kids in cages, except the media didn't care that much. Obama was bombing Syria constantly. Obama was creating a lot of, you know, war and chaos in the Middle East. And as I've talked to you about before, Deep, Obama is in many ways the reason why I'm here. He and Hillary Clinton backed up a military dictatorship and a coup that led the Honduran president to be removed from power, established a military dictatorship, and that's how I ended up here eventually. Because I can't live in my home country because um, the number of LGBTQ murders and the the violence that was caused because of that Obama Hillary backed coup was disastrous. So, I to me even seeing this musical and seeing how happy everyone was, I was like, well, maybe we should be more open to listening to all the damage that Obama caused. In 2016, I was so heartbroken because I saw how people had to decide between voting for this monster in that's currently in the White House or voting for the women who was helped by the government to destroy my home country.
Mm.
So America for me has always been a very, I don't know, very complex, very heartbreaking concept. So I never had this hope, even at Hamilton, because I knew, it was very much about what the idea of America tells itself, like what America says that it wants to be. And in 2020, it is the reality of America, where, this is the musical that whitewashes history by using colorblind casting. And it, right now it's been so eye-opening to me. I've been telling this to a lot of people, how so many of the things that are happening right now with police brutality, with corruption in government, with immigration, obviously, with the military and the cops, like unleashing their violence on people. I never thought that I would see that in America because those are the things that America does to the rest of the world. And it is really terrifying for me to be here and recognizing some of the things that I'm seeing, the fireworks and the sound torture that they're using right now, the the way in which this president's family is like, you know, making disregarding the Constitution completely and just like emptying their pockets and so much corruption, the disaster that there is right now with COVID-19. Those are things that I never thought in a million years that I would see in America. Those are the things that America helps cause in the world. So right now, every day I'm thinking, okay, if I went to the place where I was going to be saved and safe from these things, but now I'm seeing the government do these same things to its citizens, where the fuck am I going to migrate next? Right? Like it's outer space, the place for me to be in.
I would just love to sort of one of the things that's really interesting, I think, with blackness in America is that the thing that you're describing about the thing that America would never do to its own citizens, that story has never been true for the black body in America. That so for me, I have a little bit of a reactivity to the notion that America would never do this to its own citizens because that's it's it. I mean, I I literally I'm the number the that for me is a little bit that's just a difficult thing as a concept for me. And one of the things that I think is very interesting about Hamilton and this is sort of, for me specifically, what's different about Hamilton in 2015 versus Hamilton now, is for me, I have better contextualized the American relationship to the Black body in a way that makes it so, when I saw Hamilton before, what I was witnessing as a Black person was looking at the possibility of achievement given to the Black body. So I was witnessing Black bodies achieve things, and I was like, this is a glorious coup. This is amazing. I am so thrilled to see Renee Elise Goldsberry on stage being a complicated and interesting character in a way that Black bodies are not afforded that space. I think Leslie Odom Jr. delivers a performance of a lifetime in the show. This is an exciting thing for me. For me, within my own understanding of Blackness and America, when I now look at, when with this sort of newly reopened eyes about the way that this country treats the Black body, and I put that story on top of the story of Hamilton, and I go, oh, so what has happened in Hamilton is not a celebration of the Black body. It feels like the use of the Black body to better make a story about whiteness more palatable to us. And that for me is the thing that's like very different. I have this, and again, as a person who loves of musical theater, and I love well executed musical theater, I'm like, huzzah, musical theater. I love this in this thing. But then when I sort of think about the context of what I'm seeing, which the show does very little to actually acknowledge or sort of point out to us, when I think about the context of using Black bodies, and I mean specifically Black bodies in this context, there are spaces in which the BIPOC experience is in fact a holistic and a gathered experience. But within the experience of America, the experience of the Black body is unique, and the way that this show specifically erases the experience of the Black body at that time, I find it, the cognitive dissonance that I have to put into the watching of the show to buy into the story, to say that yes, a Black body can be concerned with my own legacy beyond my concern with my literal survival, is a really hard, it's a hard space to carry those two stories together, which to me has nothing to do with historicity of the show. I'm not interested in like whether I understand that this is that Hamilton is that an article came out today that was talking about how it's a fan fiction, that it's a deliberate reclamation of history. The thing about fan fiction is that fan fiction is taking an established story that we know and we culturally understand as a story, and then reclaiming a story. The problem that I have with the history in Hamilton is that we're only just now, I feel like, reckoning in a real way with the fact that history is in fact a fiction. So the relationship between the story that is Hamilton and the story that is the fictional history, I love that people are like, yay, this is wonderful. People get to sort of take apart and reclaim pieces, and like, I love that. Like, if you tell me Harry Potter rewritten with Black people, I'm like, oh, sorry, not Harry Potter. We canceled that. I don't want to deal with Harry Potter. No, everything is not safe.
Everything is canceled in 2020.
No, but if we take a story like, you know, let's take a fictional story. Like, the only thing that I'm coming into
like
my head
Cinderella.
is like Cinderella, right? And we reclaim Cinderella, and we like that. For me is like, we're reclaiming a fairy tale, and the power in reclaiming fairy tales is about the open power of changing the myth. And for me, we're not explicitly doing that with American history, or at least it doesn't feel like everyone is doing that. And I'm very interested in shattering the myth of American history right now. So for me, Hamilton in 2020 doesn't actually actively work to shatter the myth of America. And in fact, it continues to reassert the story of American exceptionalism, the story that there are individual men, always men, who impacted the change of the world in great and inspiring ways. Our founding fathers existed. And Hamilton does not confront that version of history. The thing that Hamilton confronts is that you can put a different body on stage and a different story can be told. And that for me is the thing that's like deeply Obama era, which is like, yeah, we have a black president and therefore we have worked to dismantle these things. Yeah, we have a black person playing Burr, therefore we have sort of moved beyond this thing. And I think right now we're in this wonderful and terrifying moment where we're able to look more deeply at that relationship and actually say to ourselves and to others, be like, wow, I don't know that history went like this. I don't know that it's the story of these extraordinary white men who did things. I think they might have had blind spots too. And again, it's not to say that Hamilton doesn't say that these people have blind spots, that they're not people. It is a great story, right? The story of Hamilton is great. But my question is, how does it contribute to what our culture is saying about ourselves, about our relationship between the bodies in our country right now, about just about life? And that for me is where the sort of difference really lies, which is like, I don't want to talk about whether Hamilton is good or bad. Hamilton's great. Like, it's just so well done. Like, the craft on display is extraordinary. But the insidious thing, what we're actually saying, which is, that America is amazing, in specifically that America is a genius project, is like, white people love that story.
But I wonder if the way that Hamilton has been received is so much because of who had access to see it. So I will say that I saw Hamilton in October, I believe, in 2018, but I think earlier that year I had already seen John Leguizamo's Latin History for Morons. So actually seeing Latin History for Morons before you see Hamilton, I feel like totally changes the way you see Hamilton.
Okay, it's on HBO. I should watch it.
And it's on Netflix too. But I saw it in New York on stage at, what was it, Roundabout at Studio 54, I think is where it was. And I will say that theater experience at Latin History for Morons was the kind of theater experience I wanted to have at Hamilton, because the audience at John Leguizamo's show was all brown all around, to quote Sandra Cisneros, okay? And it was the first time I'd ever sat in an audience on Broadway that was all brown all around like that. And then it's like John Leguizamo giving you this context and this history inside of his own personal story. So I definitely had the experience of carrying that with me before seeing Hamilton. Now, when we talk about the world of 2015 versus the world of 2020, I think that all of you have made salient points. I will say that when I saw the musical the first time, I was impressed by the stagecraft. I mean, the technique, I mean, it's Western musical theater done exquisitely. But it was always a fiction to me. In the way that the Schuyler Sisters story was handled, the misogyny was just more than I could, stomach for one sitting in the first time I saw it. And I felt the same way when I watched it on Disney Plus. And even with the woman who he has an affair with and that whole bit, I mean, comedian Katherine Ryan does an excellent bit in her stand-up comedy special, Glitter Room, where she talks about how like this woman went to her representative because her husband was abusing her and he ends up sleeping with her. And it's like, yes, this is only the way a man would write this. Like, what do you mean say no to this? Like, she's desperate. Say no. She thinks she has to sleep with you to get help. Like, stop it. So that was always like problematic to me. And then the handling of the 3/5 compromise and the way it's kind of like glossed over and like sails, and it's like, but Eliza redeems the legacy by being an abolitionist, and it's like, no, like the 3/5 compromise is literally what we are dealing with in the streets of every city in America right today. So when we talk about 2015 versus now, I think that the only difference for me in how I view it is that looking at the Revolutionary War scenes in 2020, versus the Revolutionary War that's happening on the streets of America right now, the war scenes struck me differently because it seems as if we are on the verge of another sort of revolutionary war, and we don't know what our Constitution and what will the Federalist Papers, right, of 2020 be versus what they were in 1776. I think that's where it's a little different for me, because the issues have not changed for people of color in this country between 2015 and 2020. The issue is still higher unemployment rates, inequitable access to health care, ICE and immigration detention and deportation being absolutely out of control, police brutality being out of control. I mean, we have to remember that police brutality against Black folks has been an issue since the beginning of this country. You know,
well, since the beginning of police.
Right. It's one of those things where it's like we had killings of unarmed Black people happening in 2015 and in 2016 and 2017, and they were happening in 2000, and they were happening in 95, and they were happening in 85, and they were happening in 65. You know, so I think that we have to reconcile that. I think that another thing that I will say is different, though, is I think that we have critical mass behind ideas today that we didn't have in 2015. I think generally speaking, we have more critical mass around the idea that ICE needs to be abolished. I think we have more critical mass behind the idea that the way policing currently works in this country doesn't work, and that stand your ground laws in this country enables white people to kill people of color without consequence. I think we have more critical mass behind that. I think we have more critical mass behind women's bodies and how women have never had full agency over their own bodies in this country. So I think we have more critical mass behind the ideas that the founding of this country didn't honor today than we did in 2015. But I don't see Hamilton, I guess, for me, any differently today than I did in 2015, when I listened to it in 2015 or saw it in 2018, because it was always a fiction to me. And it was never something where it was like, it all felt like a metaphor. It all felt like satire. It all felt like comedy of manners. Like, it never felt... which I love comedy of manners. That's one of my
me too. I
love. You know, it always felt like that to me, but it doesn't take away it doesn't take away the brilliance of the stagecraft that it is. It was always a work that was flawed.
Yeah.
It's what I know I've spoken a lot, but I love everything you just said. I want to underline something that or rather, I'm interested in making sure that as I look at Hamilton, that in all of the spaces in which Hamilton is problematic, that I also think that Hamilton also happened in 2015, and I think it represented a shift in a conversation that I think it was that cannot be taken away. The importance of the shift that Hamilton did, which was actually about divorcing character from body, which was a defense of white American theater that for decades, right? As long as white American theater has been around, they've been defending the fact that these characters would never look like X, Y, or Z thing. So Hamilton did an amazing scalpel attack on that particular instantiation of white supremacy. And I think that we would not be in this conversation, this beautiful conversation between the four of us wouldn't exist without the existence of these sorts of things, right? The critical mass that you're referring to, it's like Hamilton contributed to that move, if nothing else, even if it's still problematic, even if it's in the face of all of those sort of its problematic spaces. That's also I think we got to just keep moving forward. We got to keep thinking about the things that we can change, rather than being like, no, Hamilton was it. Because I think that it's just obvious that Hamilton wasn't it. It was just a really great moment.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that you're 100% correct. And I think that, like I said, there are things that Hamilton, to me, and Lin-Manuel Miranda, I would argue, did this with In the Heights as well. I still love the book of In the Heights more because I think Kiara Huda gave it like a nice balance that is missing from Hamilton. And she's just a banging playwright. But,
yeah.
I think that Hamilton raised the bar, as people of color, immigrants in particular, always do. You know what I mean? Like, big shocker that as soon as you give a Black and brown cast a bunch of money in investment, they raise the standard for all musical theater for the end of time. Shocking.
Right.
No one. You know what I mean? It's like, we can sing, shut up. You know what I mean? You should go to a church on a Sunday. So, I mean, I think we could dance, stop it. You know what I mean? So I think that, it showed off what we are capable of when invested in 100%. And I think that's something that Hamilton does well. And I think also providing jobs is something that has done well. I mean, we can't deny the fact that when you have 3 touring casts going simultaneously, how many hundreds of people is that employing that otherwise would not have been employed? So I think we have to give that credit, but also acknowledge, the spaces in which there are plot holes, and there are and a hero has been made of someone who did horrible things as a result of having a musical named after him. Again, though, that goes back to the point I made earlier of, I'm not sure if a hero would have been made of him as much had the audience that had access to see it early on been more reflective of this country as opposed to of the elite who could afford the ticket.
Yeah.
I want to say, Kelundra, that I love that you brought up misogyny, because like immediately after going to that show, I remember saying like, Hamilton is, for me at least, the most boring, dull character in the show. And I'm like, how are all of these like super like cool, like interesting, complex women in love with this guy who's so bland? So I was like, I didn't get it from the beginning. So, and it still doesn't work. I still don't know how, I still don't get it, but whatever. We're talking about how Hamilton is the perfect musical, to have come out of the Obama era. Because in many ways, Lin-Manuel also is very much like Obama in that, for people of color, for people who are Black and non-Black people of color also, we have such few, like there's such a few number of people that we can look up to, that it is very difficult for us to then acknowledge that they have a bad side, that they have that problematic side that we like talking about. And I mean, I've told Deep many, many times how many problems I had with Hamilton. And it's been refreshing for me to see, now that the musical is available for everyone to see, how I was like, oh God, I wasn't alone all of this time. And it's important then that we address what is our third and final bill for today's session. And it's the burden of representation. How when we have a person who's not white be under the spotlight, by default, they end up having to represent everyone. And we are not giving them the liberty to be human beings, to be complex, to be, to have both negative and very positive sides. Like, we just want them to be perfect. And this leads to poor Lin, for instance, or even poor Obama, to become holy cows, where to question their choices, we feel sometimes like we are betraying ourselves and that we are siding with the people who have oppressed us for so long. It was very heartbreaking for me to see over the weekend, when I am sure that for the very first time ever, Lin-Manuel Miranda was reading people react negatively to a show that was received with universal acclaim, Kelundra, like you pointed out, by mostly white press. And I wonder now even if those people would have, those white critics would have felt comfortable saying if they had any problems with the show. Not that I want more, reviews by white critics, but anyway. And it's very heartbreaking because, probably, this man for the first time over the weekend saw, oh wow, that people, maybe don't have only 100% positive feedback to say about my musical. And I don't know if all of you saw that for a few hours over the weekend, he made his Twitter account private. And, as a human being, you can't help but be heartbroken, right? For someone to read bad things about themselves and uh, and realize that, it's impossible to be a holy cow. It's impossible to be a saint. And why we are not giving um, artists who aren't white and people who aren't white, basically, the same opportunity that we give, other people, where we're like, okay, like let's separate the art from the artist, from like Roman Polanski and like Woody Allen and all that stuff. And instead we want, no one's saying that Woody Allen and Roman Polanski, for instance, or Harvey Weinstein, or like enter like X number of problematic men, white men and women, right? But we expect our people to be perfect. And that is not fair. So I wonder, like for the sake of transparency, if all of you would be okay with maybe answering the following question. How are we, in our own way, problematic? Because we are Lin, we are Obama, we are every person who's not white, who has had to carry that weight. And first of all, I was presumptuous. Do all of you feel that? Have all of you felt that at any point, that you have to represent everyone from your community and everyone from, like if I fail at my job, they're never going to hire a Latino again. In my case, like I feel that. Like if I fail at my job, they're never going to hire an immigrant again. And I wonder, for starters, if that's true for all of you. And if it is, would you be comfortable talking about what makes you problematic? Should I go first?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, I'll go first. Okay. I'm extremely problematic in the many ways in which I have refused to see that I am not wanted, perhaps, in white institutions and white organizations. And instead, I have tried to bring in more people of color to join me. And perhaps not necessarily, I mean, in part because I want to see more people of color and non-white people join me in those places, right? But also, I've been wondering, as I've been thinking about this question, is it also because I'm just tired of being alone and I want to share my misery with these people? Like, why should I be the only one suffering? And I mean, this is in fact one of the things that led me to, I'm in the process of creating like a theater critics institution, organization, sorry, uh, for critics of color. And I said to myself, like, stop bringing, your people in to share the pain with you, and instead just like create something new. Like, I have been very problematic in not learning that I don't need to please white people, that I can please myself and I can please, the people who need to be pleased, actually, instead of like imposing the same rules of whiteness in all of them. And obviously, these are things that are ingrained in all of us. I was trying to explain to someone over the weekend that Latinos uh, are extremely problematic because we are raised on anti-blackness, and we only get to see movies and TV made in the United States, where we see ourselves as drug dealers, gardeners. We see Middle Eastern people as terrorists, and we see Black people as criminals, and like they're always like the person who's like really bad. And because we become brainwashed by all that media that America is exporting, we aspire to be white. And I am very grateful to have come to the United States, because now I can see that how that's all an illusion, it was all a myth. Like we're being taught to not fight with our brothers and sisters, and instead to fight for whiteness when we aren't white. So thank you for listening.
I will say that for me, I don't know that I have ever felt the need to represent my entire community and carry my whole community on my back. But I also don't know what it's like to not have been taught that I am doing that at all times anyway. So I can't even distinguish between my own feeling versus what I was brought up to know and believe, which is that, you are always a representative of of your community, of the Black community, and you have to, you know, make sure not to come off as like unintelligent or angry or what have you. You know, you're busting up stereotypes every door you knock down. So I don't know, like I can't even distinguish between my own feeling about that versus what I was taught my whole life, to be honest with you. And as far as where am I problematic, I would say that I think that have been problematic in, I think I can agree with you in some ways, Jose, in trying to integrate spaces where that claim to want integration, but actually weren't willing to do the work of integration, right? So I think that there's definitely some of that there. And I also think in maybe not pushing harder for art created by people of color to get the same type of coverage as work created by white folks. Because I think one of the sinister things about trying to come up in media in particular, and as you all may know, is that you as the writer of color have to prove that you can critique the white work before you're allowed to only critique the work created by people of color, right? It's usually one of two experiences. Either you get your way in the door by developing your voice, critiquing work and writing about people of color, or you have to prove that you have a knowledge of this white canon because your canon isn't enough, right? To be able to be taken seriously by certain publications. And so it's like, okay, if I concede my byline in as many places as possible to prove that I'm able to write about these things better than my white peers, because you can't be just as good, you have to be better, then I can start to write about the Asian stuff, the Black stuff, the Latin stuff, the indigenous stuff, and start to pull more of that in there. And I think buying into the idea that like those were the steps to being able to do that, this may be a place where I have been problematic. Now I will say today, right now, I think I'm just like, I'm with the rest of the world on like the F it all. And just, there's no more censoring. There's no more playing nice. There's no more. It's just like, whatever. But I can honestly say, especially throughout my 20s, feeling like, okay, if I can get in here and get them comfortable with this, then I can be able to do this. When it's like, instead of going from point C to point A to M to K, it's like, just straight shot it. I don't know if anything I just said made any sense.
Yeah, I hear you.
It was great.
Okay, I was like, I feel like I'm just like,
like, thank you for following me. I was like, oh God, no one's gonna say anything, and then we're gonna leave.
We're gonna just leave, having Jose be like, I'm problematic. And we're like, thank you, bye.
Let's cancel this guy tomorrow. Yeah.
We're not canceling. I'm not in favor of cancellation unless you don't want forgiveness, then, or to do better. If people who want to do better can be redeemed, if you don't want to do better, then you're canceled.
Yeah, I would connect the two questions you've asked. I'm going to answer the second by answering the first, which is, I think I haven't really felt a responsibility toward my identity, and I believe that that's actually one of my most problematic traits. I am very loath to lead with my identity in any context, so much so that I aggressively will not lead for many years. I'm big on. For many years, I actually actively didn't tell people my race because in theater, what I look like is the thing that mattered. I never get to play as an actor. I very rarely, if ever, play my ethnicity on stage because people see me and they see something else. And so I get called in for and cast as things that I am not, which has made me very interested in the authenticity question for many years. Because if the question is that if the statement is that people can only play the thing that they are, I basically have no career as an actor because nobody sees the thing I am as what I am, which becomes this whole complicated thing, which actually results in my presentation being very much interested in I've always been really interested in fluidity, and fluidity is for me. I say I use a trick that I call slippage, which is that I let somebody else define me, and then I explain to them how I'm not that thing, which is very different than me stepping forward and defining myself. And the thing is, what I've sort of recognized in the last month or two, especially, is the ways in which that story that I tell myself is actually a tool of the white patriarchy. That my ability to define, to sort of dodge questions of who I am is actually about my proximity to whiteness. That because I believe that whiteness is a thing that allows people to define themselves for other people. So if you have the privilege to define yourself as by whatever you want to say you are, rather than by what people see you as, I think that that's a real profound space of privilege that people have and people don't question. And it has only been very recently that I've actually been reckoning with the fact that I have played into that story by actively trying to dodge questions of my own identity. And that's been it's a really tough concept because on one hand, I don't want to. It's really easy for me to sort of be in a space and see myself as in the space because of my body of color, or because of my sexuality, or because of my gender identity, or because of my neurodivergence. I can basically take all these things about myself and be like, the reason I'm in this space is this thing. But what I have tended towards doing is basically pretending like those things don't matter. And pretending like those things don't matter, I think, is, again, a tool of the ruling class. The ruling class keeps itself in power by pretending like these things don't matter. So that if you don't get a job, it's not that you're a Black person, it's that you didn't work hard enough. That story, that's the illusion. That's the story of white supremacy that I've been told. And reckoning with the ways in which my own sense of exceptionalism, like the ways in which I'm different or better than another person, is tied to that story as told by the ruling class. And that's a deeply difficult thing to reckon with. And I like talking about it in terms of theater because it gives me a nice structure with that has language that I can use to talk about the system of theater. It is much harder to talk about that in terms of my own self, my experience of self in the world. I don't know if I too don't know if any of that made sense, but it's a challenge to be alive.
Yeah. No, it's like the difference between like what you want and what you're willing to settle for. And I think in terms of like, all of us working in white spaces and working within this industry, and, to take it back to the Hamilton conversation, I think the reason the musical was so impactful was because we had never seen that kind of complexity from bodies of color on the stage. And so at the time, it felt like something revolutionary when maybe I think that's kind of ties in what makes me problematic was the fact that for so long I've accepted incrementalism in exchange for progress. And we all thought, oh, Hamilton happened, so therefore we will get to the next phase. And then now in 2020, I'm realizing, oh no, there's mainly only white people being produced in 2021 on Broadway right now. We are never going to get to the next phase. Maybe it's time to actually burn it all down. And I feel like for me especially, I've been really late to that part to turning my brain onto that part, because I had been so obsessed for a long time with getting approval from white power structures and thinking I can fix things within those white power structures, and that's the only way to do it. And now I'm thinking perhaps this Hamilton wasn't enough. Like, these small steps were not enough, and we need to be asking for more. And by we, I mean me. I'm not really telling you, but I don't want to tell you guys what to do.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I always say I want my mansion in the sky. The cabin in the sky is not enough. I want the mansion I was promised. Like, that's my thing. I'm with you 100%.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all. Like, it sounds crazy, but my idea of a perfect world, and I guess of a perfect America, would be one in which all of us, whether white or not white, are allowed to be problematic and complex. And we are so far away from that I guess I thank Lin-Manuel Miranda, and I thank Obama and Hamilton for giving us an opportunity to have a conversation like this. It's been very moving. Thank you all for sharing. And I'm sorry that I dropped that on you.
Thank you all for having us on and sharing your platform. I'm very proud of you and what you all have done over the last few years. You have shaken up the conversation. And I think given some artists even the inspiration to shake up the conversation where they can. So kudos to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me on. This has been an inspiring 90 minutes. I
cannot believe it took 90 minutes. You had so many thoughts that
I know, and I was like, I have a whole list of things that we didn't even talk about. I'm like, oh yeah, okay.
Right.
Yeah, we had 4 bills originally, but I was like, let's insert the last one, because the last one I feel is very important.
What was the bill we missed? Can you tell us in this last 2 minutes before you hang up? What was the bill we missed?
I don't even remember.
Curious.
I had it on my phone.
Like talking about the backlash, talking about like what the musical didn't address and how it could address it, or maybe not, because Lin-Manuel, do you expect Lin-Manuel Miranda to talk about slavery in a nuanced way that will satisfy everybody?
Oh,
no.
I absolutely not. But I also want to clarify, one of the things that we have done is we have done a slippage point where we talk about Lin-Manuel Miranda as though he's the primary creator of this show, which he is. And Lin-Manuel Miranda is in fact a body of color, so like, go him. But the 4 creators of that show are in fact 4 cis men, 3 of whom are white.
Yeah.
So it's really important for me that in all of our conversations about how great Lin-Manuel Miranda is, we recognize that the structure that Lin-Manuel represents is that a group of white men have basically put him at the forefront of the structure within the context of this genius narrative to allow him to be the unique and exceptional person of color in a system that serves a set of white bodies, a set of white male bodies, a set of cis white male bodies, a set of straight cis white male bodies. So,
and as a caveat to that, I know y'all have to go. Right?
No,
it's like we're like Kanye.
We can be late.
We're like Kanye and tailoring you right now. We're like, and let's just speak really a minute. But also, I think it's worth saying that within the Latinx community, right? Lin-Manuel is a white Puerto Rican, right? He's not Afro-Latino. He does not identify as Afro-Latino. Okay. The reason he was cast as the chimney sweep in Mary Poppins is because he's not Afro-Latino. So I think that is also just an important thing to note, is that he is a person of color. He does speak from a specific lens. I like I said, not discounting the inclusion of what he's done with like Freestyle Love Supreme and In the Heights and Hamilton and blah, 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 blah. But he has proximity to privilege by virtue of not being Afro-Latino. And is educated in, that in the way that many of us were, that most of us on this call were, with the exception of Jose, educated in PWIs and learned the way to navigate them. There's there's a set of tips and tricks that code switching gives your toolbox. You know what I mean? That everybody doesn't have access to, where you know how to get things out of people because you've learned how, because you studied them.
And there are bodies that can code switch with different effect than other bodies. And that we're like, we're done. I'm obsessed with you, Kelundra. Everything you said here, I've been like,
I'm like, how did I not know you before?
What is going on?
You all have to connect us via email or something so we can find each other.
Yeah, you would be surprised, Kelundra, because I went to American school in Honduras, and I know everything about the American Revolution, and I don't know who the Honduran national heroes are. I don't know. We were not taught anything about like the indigenous tribes over there. And in fact, and I lived in Costa Rica when I was an adult. In fact, I had someone who lives in Costa Rica who told me, blank-faced, there are no black people in Costa Rica. And my mouth just like, my jaw fell like. But you would be surprised with how much America influences the way the rest of us all over the world are educated and what we are taught and what we are allowed to think and not think about. So thank you both again for this. It was such a pleasure. It was such a joy.
Oh my goodness, the world is not wide enough for that conversation. That was so much, Jose.
And we left stuff out. Can you imagine if we had...
We left stuff out. We didn't even talk about any... I know. We didn't even talk about any of the acting.
Or the history, or...
Yeah, but you know what? I hope what you take away from this conversation is the fact that you can like something or admire it, and you can and it can also be problematic. And it's okay. It's okay to have both. Most of the brilliant things in life have both.
Yeah, we are all problematic.
Yes, we are all problematic. Even Lin-Manuel Miranda. Disney does not want you to be problematic, but you know what? We want you to be problematic. It's good for the culture.
Yep, I mean, who is more problematic than Disney, right? So anyway, thank you so much, Heath and Kelundra, for joining us. It was such a joy. It's like one of my favorite episodes, I think, that we've recorded.
Oh, wow. So you don't like talking to me? You want to go talk to other people?
No, I mean, it's always so exciting because I felt like, like, it's like the squad,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was like...
Oh, yeah, and you're the AOC? Work.
Anyway, thank you for tuning in.
Alexandra.
Oh my God. Yes.
It scans. It totally scans.
Alexandra, Ilhan, and Diana.
The Congressional Sisters.
Oh, we're missing one of them. Now I feel so bad. We're missing Rashida. Sorry.
Yes, we're missing Rashida.
Sorry.
She can be Aaron Burr. It's fine. It's fine.
Okay. So thank you for tuning in for part 2 of our Super Avengers Infinity War episode. Anything else we want to say to the people?
We did a lot this week.
Yeah.
And so if you would like to support us by helping us do more stuff, then you can be a Patreon. You can support our Patreon at Patreon/Token Theater Friends, and for as little as $1 a month, you're able, you can help us run this show, run our website. We do so much, and help is good. We are all a team. This is kind of like all of the cast of Hamilton coming together to create something great. Come join our cast.